So really, combination of the wonderful climate down here and a healthy lifestyle, you should live to about 120.
Well, that's the idea. I'm hoping not to spend too much money on medical costs anyway, even though I did join the private health insurance out here, which I don't know whether any of your listeners or viewers would be aware is a fraction of the cost. The quality of private private health, I'm told, is as good as any part of Northern Europe. But when I was in Ireland paying a private health, I was paying over 1,100 euros a year. I now pay for exactly the same service, 55 a month. So that's a third almost. And even, I think it's, anyway, it's a fraction of the cost. And it's age related, and I'm just 60. When I get to 70, it still will be a third cheaper than what I was paying as a 55-year-old in Ireland.
I'll come back to the healthcare service in a minute. Talked about friends and meeting in the pub and so on. Who do you find your friends here are? Are they a combination of different nationalities? Do you stick with the Irish community? Do you have Spanish friends? How does that work?
I would say for most people in my situation, expats, they would gravitate towards their own language speakers. So they would have friends who are Irish or English, would be in our case. But if there were Australians or Americans or Canadians around, the language would tend to give a common cause. Secondly, because there are quite a number of Irish pubs and an area in Marbella that I call the Irish Quarter, where there's 2 or 3 Irish pubs, people know if they go there that they'll be able to watch sports TV. If they don't have sports TV from their own country in their apartment, they can go and watch the local match or watch a particular program, and they'll meet people of like mind. Then the expat community, even, for example, German and Dutch people, many of whom speak English fluently, would also gravitate to that community, the expat. Now there's an increased number of Russian people, but unless you have common cause, like playing paddle, tennis, golf, it would tend that the Northern Europeans would tend to, in my experience, Dutch, Irish, English, tend to socialize together. Then you have organizations like the Third Age, you know, for people of a certain age, or the British Legion, or the bridge clubs, or if you have an interest, then that would tend to, or if you like line dancing, for example. I know a pub down the coast where they do line dancing once a week, and people have developed friendships through that activity. So it tends to be, so any of the Spanish people I can call a friend is directly related to my involvement in paddle tennis.
So that's your link to Spain, as it were.
Absolutely. And I think that's why so many people in the expat community don't make Spanish links, because they don't have a shared language or a shared activity basis that even the golf clubs, I have friends who come out and play golf, and I drive them to their various matches, and I'm fascinated by how few Spanish are in any of those clubs that I have seen. There probably are in some, but the private clubs, a lot of them, they're mixing with, they're playing in the Captain's Prize. It's Irish, English, Dutch, German, predominantly for starting off, and then other countries after that. But the other countries would include Spain, you know, as a minority.
And I understand you're a bit of a dab hand when it comes to pub quizzes. Probably because you're the only one in the room who's sober, actually, now we know.
Dab hand might be too strong a term to use. But like that, one of the cafes that I frequent runs a pub quiz every month. And as part of supporting them and meeting socially, you might have 30 people who turn up there, and it's a nice social gathering, and it's a bit of fun as well.
So this is sounding to me really as if you're having a pretty active social life here, one way or the other.
Well, initially when I came out, I felt I was suffering from a condition called euphoria. And the only thing that has happened in the 3 years is that the condition has become chronic. It's a wonderful, if you have it under control and you have a certain, I feel the lifestyle I have suits me. I know there are people who would think this is a mad way to live with all this exercise. But my attitude is, while I can do it, while all the moving parts are still functioning, I will. And when I can't, I'll take up golf.
Right. What would you say your active hours are? In other words, are you someone who gets up early in the morning and goes to bed at a sensible hour, or are you up at midday and go to bed at 4 in the morning?
Unfortunately, I'm somebody who burns it at both ends.
Right.
In that normally we play paddle tennis about 9:30 or 10, which means I have to have my breakfast over and my run done.
Yes.
So my normal getting up time would be 7 a.m.
Yeah.
or 7:30, depending on going for run on the days when I'm having an early game,
Yes.
which would not be typical.
Yes.
And then because some of my friends would work in restaurants or cafes, I would tend to, even if I go into the pub or out for a meal or something and should be going home at 11, somebody wanders in that says, have a drink with me. And so it's midnight or 1 a.m. So,
Yes.
but the great thing is being retired, you have the opportunity to take a siesta should the need arise.
And if you want to lie in, you're free to have one.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay, living in Spain, you've touched on healthcare already, but can we just sort of go through a number of attributes of living here and score them on sort of a score out of 10? Schools, you won't have had any contact with them here, I suspect.
No, but because of my background in education, I would speak to people. So I know several teachers who are teaching in the international school system. I know several Spanish bar staff who might discuss how their children are getting on in the national school. And, so you have the three systems. You have the Spanish national system, primary and post-primary. You have the private Spanish system, the colegios and that are not too expensive, but are still where it's private education. And then you have the British School of Marbella, the Laude School, and they're all bilingual, but they tend to use the English system and prepare children for universities in Britain and other countries.
Have you been able to form an opinion as to how Spanish education compares with, for example, Irish education?
I understand from talking to people, I haven't been in any of the schools, I understand it's very hit and miss. And for example, there were people...
This is the standard state school.
The standard state school that, for example, in Marbella, if there are X number of primary schools, you want to enroll your child so that you get them in school A or school B, because you certainly don't want your child to go to school Z, because the children who go there and the standard of education there is not what you would want for your child. So, and that would appear to me to be less common in Ireland. I think in general, people in Ireland, the standard doesn't vary tremendously from the north to the south, from the east to the west. So if you settle in a town in Ireland, there are standardized testing and whole school evaluations, and pretty much the standard of teaching will be equally high. You might have some schools that have a particular interest in sport or dance, and that would be an additional added value. But I don't think there's as much a variation as there is within the Spanish system. And for example, the doctor I go to, without mentioning any names, who is married to a Spanish lady and has children, he told me that he was insistent that his children go to the state system, but he removed them from the state system after a certain number of years because he could not believe how, open the book on page such and such, almost painting by numbers, that it seemed to lack creativity and that it was very, if you like, old-fashioned. Now that's
how I was taught 60 years ago. Yes.
So that's, now as you say, I don't have direct experience, but and quite a number of people would try, of the expat community, would try and send their children to either the Spanish private schools when they get to second level, or to, if they're thinking my child might want to go back to university in Ireland or England, they will want them to do the English system that prepares them for that.
I think those views would resonate with what quite a number of other people have said to us. Although I think the flip side is that getting your kids into the state system when they're young is probably the best way of getting them to learn Spanish very quickly and getting to understand Spain. But perhaps there's a point where you want to make a lift.
Well, I would certainly, from my personal experience, everyone I know who has children growing up here is insistent on bilingualism. And in some cases, because they ask me the benefits of having three languages. So a Dutch person married to a Swedish person sending their child to school here, mother is speaking one language, father is speaking another, and they're learning Spanish in school. And they were asking me, is this beneficial or what? And all I could say was, I know all the evidence for bilingualism is extremely strong, that learning two languages assists you in later life in learning other languages.
It opens so many doors as well. If you are totally bilingual and better still bicultural, the job opportunities are unlimited. Because we are in a world where we desperately need communicators.
One of the fascinating things I found when I visited Australia a few years ago was they have this system called LOTE, L-O-T-E, language other than English, and it came into existence to facilitate immigrants. So if you're from Sudan living in Australia, you have periods in your language, because they found that if you help those children learn in their own language, it actually assisted their learning in the second language they were learning. But I was fascinated because the native parents of Australian children were given choices as regards when these children are learning their own Arabic or whatever, what foreign language would you like your children to learn? And in the state of Victoria and in the greater area of Melbourne, the commonest second language they chose was Chinese, which only confirms what you're saying. They saw it as having economic benefits when they would become adults because of the location of Australia.
Okay, healthcare you've already mentioned, very good in Spain.
I was told, because I was in contact with my health insurer in Ireland, as to whether to continue with them and their worldwide system or to switch to Spanish education, and they were very honest with me in saying, well, if you intend to live furthermore in Spain, you're actually better off going to the private system. And they said to me that private hospital care in Spain is every bit as good as in Northern Europe.
And even
personally, I haven't had direct experience of it.
And long may it remain so. But even the public healthcare system here, I mean, the Costa del Sol hospital is a very, very good hospital and recognised as such.
I've known people who have needed, for various reasons, to go, and in some cases have been they've been, I won't say long stay, but they've been there for several weeks, and I've heard nothing but positive reports.
And I know, having spoken to people from other countries thinking of coming to Spain, one of their enduring fears is they're coming to some sort of third world backwater. And that is just not the case at all.
Not at all. And in general, that's the case. I remember saying to somebody about drinking the water here, because most people buy bottled water, and they said, well, you know, the water here is the same as in Dublin. I remember thinking, really? You know, but they have desalination plants, and it's a very developed country in many ways.
Yes. Public administration. One of the bugbears for many people who have lived or worked or had anything to do with Spain. How have you got on with that, registering you with the town hall and all of this other stuff?
It is quite bureaucratic. Compared to Ireland, it is very bureaucratic. As far as I know, and I'm open to correction on this, I don't think we in Ireland have gestorias, which is a layer of administration and bureaucracy that doesn't exist in any country I've known. So if I want to get something renewed, like my motor tax, or something changed, like if I had a car with Irish registration plates, I wouldn't dream of going to Malaga and queuing up to, I go to this person called the gestor,
this gopher,
and pay him, and while he's at it, would he please do the following 3 jobs for me also, all bureaucratic jobs. And it's almost like, for him to have an existence, the bureaucracy needs to. I'll give you one example. I went to, I won't mention details, but to do forms and to get a certain arrangement with the town hall, and I was told that the utility bill was 4 months old and it had to be 3 months or less. So I needed to go and get a more current one. And then I needed to provide a copy of a document. And I said, well, I have the original, you can keep it. No, we can only accept a copy. And then I said, looking around at their system, well, can you copy it? No, you have to copy it. And this was after I had taken a number and queued and waited for. And I almost felt like they felt that was part of their job, that you weren't going to get it done first time round. So, you know, Second time round, you would know exactly what you had to have. So a little more difficult than...
It is moving forward, though. I think I was talking to someone earlier today who said that they managed to MOT their bike in 30 minutes and that they could download things off the internet. So
I had the same experience with the ITV, the MOT on my motor car. And I would consider it more advanced than in Ireland, because, for example, in Ireland, you hand in your car and you can look through a window and you may or may not be able to see what's going on, but magically it comes out the other end and then you wait with bated breath. In Spain, you queue up and then they signal you in and they ask you English, Spanish, and then if you choose English, somebody who has English will say, operate the wipers, turn on the lights, and when they're working underneath, they'll say, rev the engine. So you have a very hands-on, transparent kind of experience. So when you get the report, you know it's valid.
And of course, it makes it cheaper because they've only got one person doing the test rather than two.
Exactly.
Yes.
And you don't have to wait very long because as they're going, they're filling it in as you're carrying out the function. I was very impressed with that. And because I don't know whether it was because of the age of my car or because he announced to me that you're fortunate enough to get a 2-year, so I don't have to have it done every year. It's 2 years. I got the impression he was implying because you passed very well, well done. But it might actually be that my car is 7 years old and not older.
But when it comes to the administration here, I think if you're coming from parts of the world where the administration is slick and sophisticated, you may find this a little cumbersome.
Yes. And it does, local knowledge is very important. And unfortunately, I have some experience of two in my 3 years, two speeding fines, tickets. And just the first one came, and when I went to pay it, again, it was cumbersome, but there were a number of banks you had to go to. Now, that was something you don't have in Ireland. But when the second one came, and I went to the bank, they looked at me with some exasperation and said, this is Traffico. It's a different crowd who are fining you than the local police. And you know for Traffico, it's online you pay it. So, you know, this is a learning experience. Nobody tells you that, you know, or you can't actually read it in a book.
And I think it's important as well, isn't it, to remember when you come here, you have to learn how the system works, because if you don't understand how it works, the administration will seem even more cumbersome and insane. Whereas when you understand how it works, it has a sort of internal logic to it, but you just have to accept.
Well, like that, once you've had that, once I've learned that they have speed cameras up, I'll now ensure that I drive strictly within the speed limit. So hopefully I won't have to use that experience again. But I know that, and I've read reports in the local newspaper, that in quite a number of communities, they have retired people with fluency in both languages coming in certain times during the week to the Ayuntamiento, the town council, to assist any foreigners who are looking to register as fiscal or non-fiscal residents and to make the process easier. So they're trying hard.
And in fact, not just here, but throughout the coast of Spain, wherever there are large numbers of foreign residents, they have the Foreigners Department, which is staffed with people whose job it is to assist foreigners to make this transition.
Yes, and I know that in the recent change that happened in the local elections in Marbella, when the new regime came in, apparently they changed all the officers, but the person in the foreign residence had made such valuable contacts in the Irish, English, Dutch, German, Russian communities that the incoming person asked them to stay on, which I thought was a very good decision.
The police you've already mentioned stopped, invariably courteous?
Absolutely. I've had no, I'm fortunate, I haven't ever been a victim of crime, and they're high profile. They are constantly on the paseo and driving in the and I don't know anybody that has had any negative dealings with them.
And professional. High-profile policing is something we seldom see in Northern Europe anymore. But you just have to accept that there's going to be a police presence. It's not an intrusive presence, but it's there all the time.
And it's because they're on motorbikes, they're in cars, they're on horses. Admittedly, Marbella is not all Spain.
Of course.
It's like when people say, how are things in Spain? I say, well, I can't talk about Spain. We're in a tourist part of Spain that is very specific. And I know, for example, several of the motorbikes they have here are Harley Davidsons, a gift of the Saudi prince at one stage. So, and the horses are very, very decorated and that. So it's a tourist kind of, and they have
not only
that
a tourist, but also a very wealthy tourist part of Spain.
Yes,
So,
yes.
You're absolutely
and
right
in some ways
that.
slightly more expensive than other parts of Spain. But the attitude of the police, you know, they're the three types of police here, which is also important to understand, that the Policia Locale only deal with traffic matters and minor matters. As one barman said to me, if he had to clear his pub out at night and somebody was being obstreperous, he'd send for the Policia Locale. If that person pulled a knife, he'd change the call to the national police, who are at a more serious level. And then the paramilitary police, the Guardia Civil, are the heavy duty.
Areas, really. Legal system.